Awesome. Okay. Yep, I see the notification. Sweet. So, yeah, and Nate is in the chat as well. I think he just put a notification right there. But yes, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. My name is Shannon, and I'm going to be your instructor today. And what I'm going to be showing you guys is one, how to draw. And I'm going to start with drawing, and then we'll move into the coloring process. So we'll start off with like some basic geometry and how I draw these building shapes. And then, like I said, we'll move on to the coloring portion next. So from my point of view and like my background with Copic, I've been using Copic for about 12 years now, and I have a BFA in illustration from the Savannah College of Art and Design. So I went to SCAD, and my background is with markers, colored pencils, and pen and ink. So this is right up my alley, and I'm excited to show you guys how I draw and how I go about doing this. So let's go ahead and switch my camera view to the overhead so we can see. Okay, are you guys seeing this workspace? I'm seeing some nods. Okay, awesome, thank you. Okay, sweet. So I've just got, this is what I'm gonna be doing today. So I've got Sketch Fusion over here to the side. There's 3 different Sketch Fusion sets that I'm gonna be coloring with. One is yellows, one is reds, and the other is blues. So we've got primary colors, and I do already have those swatched out just for reference. So I also have 4 by 4 inch squares drawn out. This is an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, just a standard premium cardstock. It is a 65-pound cardstock, so medium to heavyweight. I like this. This is like a go-to choice for me when I'm coloring. And so with this first square, again, just 4 by 4 inches, I'm starting small. I'm going to just start to add some geometric shapes. And so anything from rectangular shapes, I'm just doodling up here at the top, to basic triangles, kind of reminiscent of geometry back in high school. Circles, we're going to be using circles or dome shapes for like a roof right here. Oval shapes and everything like that. So I'm actually going to show an example just really quick. And this was the banner for when you signed up for the class. This is the example. And I just want to show this really quick to see when I made this plant, it really is just a circle with a couple of different organic looking branch shapes. Same with the columns and the rooftop here. So everything can be broken down into basic geometry. And in the beginning stages, your best friend is your pencil and your eraser. So just make sure when you're in the sketching process here, don't press too hard on the paper either, because that's going to be a lot more difficult to erase. Whereas if you're pressing down lightly and you need to make some changes, you can do that pretty easily. So just keep that in mind as well whenever you're sketching. And so, yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and get started here. And I am right-handed, and so I will work from the left to the right because sometimes I get graphite smudges on the back of my hand. So because I'm right-handed, I like to operate in this direction. So I'm just going to start off with making sure my lead is pretty long. I like to do that when I'm sketching loosely. And when I'm sketching loosely, I'll move my hand further back on the pencil. And so this helps me get a wider range and just more flexibility for my wrist. So I'm going to kind of split this up into thirds. So I'm going to look about a third of the way over, and I'm going to make a little hash mark. And then I'm going to move up and try and eye this line that I already have pre-drawn. And sometimes you'll see me move my pinky, and that sometimes is a guide for me when I'm moving up and down the page as well. So I'm keeping my eye on this and trying to make it parallel just by freehanding it. And I like to go up and down just to get that line established. And then I'm going to go a little bit over. I'm not trying to go exactly into thirds here, but I'm going to draw another line, just a dash mark. And then I'm going to move that up again, kind of eyeing this line over here. And I'm just drawing up like that. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to turn my paper. For me, drawing kind of up and down vertically is more comfortable. So you will see me kind of turn my page as I'm drawing. I see some comments that say they don't have audio. I'm trying to turn up my computer right here. Okay. And so now I'm just going to draw another vertical, well, because I turned it. So now another vertical line. And this is almost going to be like either the roof line or a gutter line. And I'll draw another one right next to it or on top of it. And then I'm going to actually have this middle building be shorter or smaller in height. So I'll draw another line beneath it. And again, I'm just moving up and down, not pressing too hard on the page. And I'll add another one maybe underneath it. And this might be a stylistic thing as well. For having like this established thicker kind of gutter or roof line. You can have it be thinner as well too. And I'm going to take this one and bring it up a little higher. And I'll pause and then I'll bring another line to connect it. Okay. Now I'm going to turn it back around again. So there we have it. We have just a couple of 3 different, building shapes kind of established here. And I'm not going to do any details yet. So over here, you can tell in my kind of pre-made drawing, I have like a little plant, some flowers and whatnot. I don't like to add any of those details until the greater skeleton has been drawn. So I'm going to keep drawing some outlines. And maybe I want, and this can change, right? I'm going to erase these lines right here because I want this building in the pushing in the foreground more towards us. And I'll have this one more in the background. And we can do that just by establishing where our buildings kind of run off or where they overlap too. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe make this one just into like a triangle shape. So where this line will connect, I'm drawing a dot there to establish that. And then if this is half of my building, I'm drawing this very lightly. So, and you don't have to draw this, but there's a little line that kind of signifies where my halfway point is. And this is where the fun part and adjusting goes. But I don't want my roof to be that, I guess, tall. So I'm going to connect this dot right here and then bring it over on the other side. I'll lift this up again, right? So this line, this vertical line here, you can kind of see my dot. I kind of kept it going through. I drew a middle line down the center and I connected those lines or kind of dots. So I know I'm moving kind of quickly because we've got some coloring to get to as well, but it's all just basic geometry and adjusting. So let's say you want your roof to be a little bit taller. Well, then I could have taken this dot and maybe connected it with the center part further up, like that. So if you wanted to do it, make a little pointier of a building, you can do that. And
quick question.
Sure.
Someone wants to know what kind of pencil you're using. Like what kind of mechanical pencil are you using?
Yeah, so this is a very basic pencil. It's a Pilot. It's 0.5 though. So it's a thinner lead. I think 0.7 is like your standard, but it's very generic. I also have a Pentel pencil as well that I use. But, oh, and this, I've had this for a long time, probably since college. The brand has rubbed off here, but it's essentially like a pencil eraser. And you can find me, I think Tombow might make one. I got this at Jerry's Artorama. So you just have this kind of point to your eraser to get those precise marks. So I'm going to use that right here and erase that. Oh, and a kneaded eraser or just a generic white eraser works wonderfully. And I am just doing all of this, freehand. Just kind of adjusting as I go along, and that's why using your pencil and not pressing too hard is really going to come in handy when you need to make adjustments. Okay.
All right, thanks, Shannon.
Yeah. And so over here, I'm going to actually go ahead and draw another line to establish another roof line. And then maybe I want to have like a little railing or something like I have right here. So all you need to do for that is just draw kind of small vertical lines here. And again, I'll turn my paper and I'll draw another line. Or I guess two to make them match.
While you're working on that, Shannon, good question in the chat. Someone wants to know good ways to draw straight lines like that without a ruler.
Yeah, so I think I kind of went over this earlier in the video, but for me, like I'm holding it further back in my pencil. It gives me control, but it also allows my wrist to have some flexibility. And since I have these 4x4 squares pre-drawn out, I try my best to follow along with the ruler mark, essentially, because I drew this with a ruler, to follow that line. And it has taken me years to kind of train for it, but I don't know, it's just using that as a reference and not, I guess what I just did right there, I don't draw continuously. I will kind of almost pet the paper and gently put down the graphite, if that makes sense. So just drawing another line. So let's continue right over here. I'll keep drawing a line. I'm not continuously moving it forward. I'm gently adding centimeter by centimeter as I move up. And that's usually how I can get a very straight line without using a ruler. For me personally, because this is not a technical sketch, I don't like to use a ruler. I find it bulky and just kind of in my way as I'm drawing. So I try my best to follow this principle of, going a little bit at a time and having like a reference point. If you want as well, graph paper is wonderful. So maybe you want to have a drawing like this and start off on graph paper, use the grids. And then when you want to color it later, either like have a piece of tracing paper in front of you to kind of get that drawing finalized and move to a separate sheet. But I do recommend graph paper as well. So I hope that was helpful. Okay, but yeah, I'm gonna keep kind of working right here and maybe add another line. And again, I'm focusing on this over here as I'm drawing. And I don't know who's left-handed out there, I'm sorry, because it has to be an opposite effect, but I try and always have those key visuals available so that when I'm drawing, I can kind of have that in my eyesight so I know to keep that as a guide. I hope that made sense. Okay, so yeah, just improvising here. Maybe I want to draw another little line and maybe bring that over. I haven't drawn any dome shapes yet, like this over here. So maybe I'll add one. And for dome shapes, I think the best example for this would be to actually reuse this area, or I'll do it right here. So again, I'm going to pencil in this kind of midsection in the building, and this is very light. And I'm going to try and see, okay, how high do I want this dome shape? I'm going to put a little dot. So I have like the center of my little building here. I put a dot for how high I want the shape to be. And what there's, two things you can do here. You can try and curve it, or you can turn your paper. Again, I love turning my paper. And look at how light I am pressing. I'm barely touching the paper with my pencil because I know since it's curved, I'm probably going to need to do adjustments. So I am eyeballing it and keeping that central point in mind. So I'm just trying to bring these two corners together, and I'll turn my paper again. And now I'll try and kind of smooth that out. Okay. There we go. And I think I see in the chat someone asked me if I use references. What I got inspired to draw with these kind of buildings stacked on top was my first trip to Las Vegas, and I saw all the random architecture kind of put together in one area. And I looked at that and thought, wow, it's amazing. All these different shapes and forms are all very simple, but look so beautiful put together. And that's kind of what my reference was, just getting this piece to come to existence. But yeah, so I think I'm going to actually start to add some details and show you guys how I do that. Like, for example, this plant. So it's all goes down to basic geometry again. So to draw that little plant shape, I'll draw two parallel lines, and then I'll connect them. And then I will draw one circle up here. And this is very light, but I'll lift it up. Just give me one moment. I'll lift it up to show you. And then I'll draw another, more so like an oval shape. Okay. So here is just the basic sketch, right? And now I will take with my eraser and erase this part, and I will kind of firmen out the outline portion. And if, say, I want to make this longer, I can also do that and make adjustments there. But essentially, it's just circles, ovals, rectangles, just that basic geometry, and your eraser is your best friend. So I will do that real quick. Erase those areas in the middle where they overlapped. And now I'm just going to kind of re-establish that shape. And yes, I am pressing darker. I want you guys to be able to see it. But yeah, so that circle and oval ended up looking like a little tree shape. A simpler little tree or vegetation. Let's do the same thing again. Drawing two parallel lines and then connecting them. And then I'm going to draw a line maybe about 1/3 of the way up. I'm just going to draw a line right here. And then going down the very center, I'll establish a point. And then all I'm going to do here is connect. And again, I'm holding this up, so I'm not on a table right now, but I want to show you guys closer. But that's just a basic type of tree. So I'll establish that further. There we go. I do also have some very basic cloud shapes in here. So that involves just a line and kind of 3 dome shapes. So that's more of just like a very organic kind of a doodle. with a flat line at the bottom. There are many other ways you can draw a cloud, but I feel like that's a very simple way. And yeah, I think we're almost done with the pencil process. Are there any other questions you guys have for me? Because I know I went through that pretty quick.
Anyone? Questions? Sarada wants to know, do you have to use the exact Copic colors or can you use different ones?
Oh, yeah. So for today, I'm using the primary colors because I want to show you how you can mix them to make secondary colors. But if you don't have these exact ones and you have different yellows or whatnot, that's totally fine. Or if you have purples or grays, it doesn't matter. The mixing is important to learn, and we will be doing the flicking technique later, so that color doesn't matter there either. Book suggestions on drawing. Honestly, I just look at YouTube. YouTube is a really good source, and even videos like this. So if there's any other fine art drawing classes that Michaels offers, just watch them. I feel like we learn more by watching and doing than, I mean, reading is also a good resource, but I don't have any books at the top of my head. Yeah, you can stack even more buildings. Absolutely. It doesn't have to be a 4x4 square. Yeah, this is the zero colorless blender, and the zero blender I will actually use to make the windows look more glassy or glossy. Let me see. Bristol paper is good with Copic, yes. Oh, Copic does not have any pencils. They are just a marker brand. This is a generic mechanical pencil. And I like mechanical pencils because they can get very sharp and precise without having to continuously sharpen them. I think drawing to the, okay. So this was what I was just drawing with you guys. My 4x4 square, keeping that central point in line when you're connecting roof shapes, like I did over here as well. Some basic tree shapes over here. And this is my drawing that I'm going to move on to next. Okay, and I'm actually going to slide up here to show you guys what these marker colors that I'm using today look like. So these are the yellows, the reds, and the blues. And I already made a little grid over here that shows you when you're combining blue and yellow, you get green. When you combine red and yellow, you get orange. And red and blue make violet or purple. And primary colors are here. Secondary colors are over here. So before I get to the coloring portion, I am going to show you guys how to make the green and the violet. I will be using that in the sketch today, but for these particular colors, when you mix the red and the orange, the red and the yellow together, they don't have that much of a color difference. So I'm not using that one today.
But actually, Shannon, before we start real quick, Kathy's got a good question. Do you fix like wiggly or unsteady lines, or do you count on fixing it when you're inking?
Yeah, so, okay, thank you, Nate. When I have squiggly lines or things like that, I will usually try and comb them out with this eraser. So I'll try and or a kneaded eraser to lift it a little bit more. So that works as well. But yeah, I do try and work them out if they're super wiggly. If they're a little bit, I don't care. As long as you lift the pigment off a little bit, because once you run a marker color over a pencil, you can't erase it. So I erased, so there's, you can see, I hope so, you can see a little bit of pencil marks right there inside the marker ink, but I can erase it outside of it. So just make sure you lift off the pencil as much as you can before you start to add the color. Okay, I hope that helped. Sweet. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna take YR20 right here, and I'm gonna put that squigglet on the paper first with my super brush nib. And then I'm gonna take so I'm using the light color yellow and the light color blue to make a green. So I'm layering those two colors. And now, so this was yellow first, then the blue. Now I'm going to do blue first and then the yellow because there is a slight difference with the order. So when you put the blue down first and then put the yellow down, it'll look a little bit different. So here we go. And those are with the two lighter colors, right? So when you put the blue first, it almost looks a little bit darker than when you put the yellow first. So my suggestion, like we're doing right here, we're swatching out our colors before we get into the coloring portion. I do feel like that's really helpful, especially if you have a preference. So now that I've swatched these both, I'm probably going to stick with the blue first and then the yellow because I like that green color more. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing again, but with the middle tone color. So I'm going to do YR23 and B04, and this is a darker green. And then I'll repeat it, but with the blue first. So that was blue first. That was yellow. Okay, and so those are with our midtones, right? So when you're yellow, it's almost like a blue-green, and this is more of a pure green. So when you're applying the blues first, that seems to be the outcome. So yeah, and I'll do the last one here with YR27 and B06. So I'll put the yellow first. And then the blue. It's a very dark color. And then the opposite order. And that's one last final mix here. So, but yeah, I just want to show you guys before I start coloring how you can get secondary colors such as green when you mix blue with yellow. Okay. All right. So I'm actually going to go ahead and start talking to you guys how I'm going to color this. And so I'm going to stick to something, I guess, more natural, and I want to keep the sky blue. So what you can do here, and I've got the zero blender. If you want, you can have the zero blender and lay it down first, and then add your blue if you want to make it lighter. That's a way to make the colors lighter. Or I can add the blue first and then flick the zero colorless blender on top or add it on top. So I'm going to start with blue first, and I'm going to move around and try and stay clear of moving inside any shapes. And I'm using the Super Brush nib for this. It's a very flexible nib and allows me to kind of move around and get in little corners and tight spaces. And I am coloring this vertically, kind of because the buildings follow this geometric look. So I'm just coloring in an up and down motion to almost match that. And I don't really care if my markers go outside of this 4x4 box. I can always cut it out if I need to. So I always like having that area to have bleed. And I'm leaving the clouds white. There we go. Okay. And I'm going to grab my zero blender. So this actually, there's the camera focus. Awesome. Okay. This doesn't have any alcohol in it. It's just an alcohol solution. And so this acts as a can lift the pigment or can soften blends, can create highlights. This is also a very nice tool to have in your Copic collection. And I'm going to use the super brush nib, and I'm going to flick from the building line up and try and lighten out these areas right near the buildings.
So Shannon, a couple questions.
Yes.
Diane wants to know, being in a dry climate, do you have any problems with the Copics drying out?
No, I haven't noticed any difference. I am in Colorado, so it's a little bit drier here, but I'm not in somewhere where it's more dry, like maybe Arizona. But I just keep them in a room temperature climate, and I don't seem to have an issue with it. It could be if your markers are drying that they're not snap tight enough, or I know there's two nibs, but this cap for the medium broad is actually slightly bigger. So if by accident you put that on this side, that might cause it to dry out as well. And I think I see someone say, do you store them horizontal? Yes, yeah. So I have like a marker shelf essentially, and they store flat. That's the best way to do it. If you store them vertically, sometimes the ink will start to settle at the end, whether it's one side or the other, and then it takes a while for it to travel to the other side. So I do recommend storing them flat. Absolutely. I think I see a comment that says, do you recommend buying them in packs? Excuse me. These are sets, and I think there's a benefit to purchasing sets, especially if you are new to Copic, because they're curated sets and they usually go really well together. That's why they're sold together. So I do recommend them. I do recommend, say you're drawing people, buy the portrait or skin tone set. These are primary colors, and like I just showed here, you can make different colors out of them. So just keep in mind when you're choosing colors or what you draw. So if you draw a lot of people, why would you necessarily need these colors or whatnot? So just keep that in mind.
One more blending question right here. Will colors change after one dries and you use another on top?
Yes. Yeah. So let me just use an example here. I'll scribble R56, and I can wait a little bit for that. And then I'll take B04. And so that will make like a light purple. And even with the same color. So let's say you have YR27. And then wait a little bit and layer that same color again the second time, it will be much darker. Excuse me, sorry. So for example, I just made a light purple from these two colors. And then this color here is YR27 layered twice. So it does make a difference when you layer and how much you layer. But luckily for me, nothing has came onto my desk. Obviously you can see them coming through the other side of the paper, but they shouldn't bleed through. But yeah, and I do while I'm lifting off my paper all the time. So if you can see this, I'm gonna get this really close. I use the zero blender at the base right here only, and you can start to see how it's blending right there with the B01. It's looking softer, not as marker streak. So when you get rid of the streaks, you can do one of two things. You can use the zero blender and it'll make it lighter, but it will get rid of the streaks. Or you can do what I call like the cross hatching technique. We use this a lot when you're coloring with pens. So let's say you color up and down like vertically, and then I can move the paper and I will layer it a second time. And it will turn out darker because I've layered it twice. However, that looks very smooth. Like I don't see any streaks in that. So if you want to, that's just layering twice. and almost like a basket weaving effect. You know, one time I'm coloring like this, and the next layer I'm coloring like this. So because of that, the inks kind of interweave with each other and turn out super smooth. So there we go. I'm just going to add some more Zero Blender to smooth out my sky. And then I can move on to the other parts. And right here, I'm coloring in little circular motions because I want the sky to look smoother. So I will let that dry because it might look different right now when it's wet than when it's dry. And at this point, with your little buildings, you kind of have to decide before you start laying down more color, which colors do I want to go where, you know, and do I want colors to, you know, touch or whatnot. So for me, I like the yellow color for like this central building. I think it kind of glows. So I'm going to put a Y and then I put an arrow. I know this looks ridiculous, but this helps me a lot when I'm drawing or color planning, as I would call it. I put little notes. So I think what I want to do, like if this area is light blue, to balance that, maybe I'll put light blue over here somewhere. So I'll put like a B01 note. Maybe I want to contrast or complement this right here. Maybe I'll color this with a purple. So I'll put a V for violet. So when I'm coloring or I'm starting the coloring process, I'll often do that. Take little notes or have little post-it notes nearby to swatch out or to, you know, kind of color map. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the main part here. And I'm going to take my lightest yellow and I'm going to make that the main color of this building. And like I showed earlier in this kind of swatch right there, if you have a lot of pencil marks or if you don't want your markers to smudge with your graphite, just use a kneaded eraser to lift off some of the pencil marks, or you can just kind of avoid those areas by moving around with your super brush nib. But for me personally, and I know there's a lot of different ways you can color with alcohol-based markers, I kind of like to work quickly so that all the inks can dry together versus you know, having too much time and then trying to blend back in with it. Sometimes you get that marker streak. So just beware of that. And that's why I try and color one section continuously. Okay, so now I'm going to use the other mid-tone color of yellow. And I don't know, maybe I'll have that be the doors. So I will color up and down. And I'm coloring up and down. It's also very easy for me, but the door shape itself is vertical. So when I color, I try and color the best to what I'm coloring. So for the sky, I was kind of scribbling in with that Zero Blender to make it look more organic. But right here, I'm trying to kind of stay linear or whatnot to the shape of what I'm drawing. And I'm going to turn my page and use this color right here. And yeah, I'll start with that. Make sure this isn't crooked. Okay. I'm also going to outline the sun with this color. Okay, and then I'm going to take YR27, which is our darker yellow, and I'm going to add that to this, this, and this area right here. So I'm going to turn my paper again. And for me right now, I'm holding the marker kind of in the middle here. When I get detailed, is when I scooch my hand up. But I'm still kind of relaxed, so I'm holding it here in my hand. And I'm not pressing too hard. I'm trying to let the super brush nib just glide across the paper. There we go. And this last area right here. Okay, and now I will turn it. Actually, I'm going to add this right here in the little doorknobs. And see, when I was adding those details, I held it closer. Okay. And now I'm going to color these windows. So I'm going to actually apply the Zero Colorless Blender first. Oh, that's out of focus. There we go. Zero Colorless Blender. So I'm going to apply this first, and I'm going to work pretty quick because I want this B01 color to soak in with this Zero Blender. That usually makes a color lighter. So I'm trying to add this. I'll just do the oval shape windows first. And while it's still wet, I will apply B01. Okay, I'll let that dry.
While that's drying, Shannon, Elena's got a question. What if you color horizontal on the door, but the building to the left was colored vertically? Will that make a difference visually? Will it be like distracting? What do you think?
I mean, yeah, you can. So over here, like say you want to color this way instead of vertically, I don't think that would be too distracting. The thing to remember though is like with lighter colors like YR20, they're so light, it's almost hard to see the streak marks. Whereas like even, I'll just use my swatches. It's easier to see these darker colors looking streaky than the light colors. So if you're having a different direction of how you're coloring, I don't think that's going to be too noticeable next to a light color like this. But say you're using dark colors and you color in opposite directions, I'll use these reds. So that's more of a vertical coloring, and this is more of a horizontal. There might be some difference, but really not a ton. I also refilled these markers so they're very juicy and don't have too much of a streak. But yeah, I don't think there would be too much of a difference there. I think it'd be fine. Okay, I'm trying to look at comments.
Actually, to answer Joy's question, thank you, Karina from Sales. The Memento stamp pad, that's what you need for stamping that won't mess with your Copic coloring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I thought I saw someone asking if they could see the finished piece again.
Yeah, so we've got a couple people asking for that. Okay, thanks, Shannon.
Yeah, I'm just bringing it down. So yeah, if anyone, did she draw outline in black? Yes, I did. So here are the multiliner pens. So this is 0.3 and 0.5. In the thicker areas here, I used 5. On the thinner areas where there's dots and kind of hatch marks, which are just these lines right there, that is using the 0.3. So I like having two different widths of nibs. It really is helpful for having one thicker to do the big outlining and one that's thinner to get those details. So do you want me to hold this here for a second? Okay, I'm just gonna move across. And I know this piece, again, this is a large drawing. This definitely took me a few hours to draw and color. So I'm trying to do my best to show you guys how I did that within this hour that we have. But I'm just gonna do a little bit more coloring here, and then we'll move on and I'll show some of those outlining techniques. So yeah, just one last thing. I am going to color a dark violet right here to show the contrast next to a yellow. And to do that, I'm going to do B06, which is our darkest blue. And right now I'm just outlining these shapes real quick. And I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but when I was coloring this building right here, I started off with my lightest color first. And I usually always do that within a composition because you just don't know if you need to go darker. So when you start with light colors, you can always layer on top of it to make things darker, but it's really hard to take away something when it's already so dark. So it's a lot like watercolors. It's harder to get that pigment off once you have a really dark pigment on. So just something to keep in mind. And I will take R59, which is a very dark red. And so this will turn out to be a very dark purple, but I think it looks nice next to a bright color such as yellow. I'm trying to hurry here too because I know our hour is almost up, but I will show that. So it's almost like a dark, almost close to a black, but without using a pure black color. So yeah, just color mixing with your primary colors can get a lot of different results. Okay, and I will bring in this other sheet here to just show how I do the outlining with the Multiliner pen. Okay, so here I have some partial drawings, partial colorings, but what I'm going to show is outlining. So I'm going to take my 0.5 multiliner, and this is a Copic product. So this is a water-based ink, and I like to use this as a finishing touch, but if you apply this first and then use your Copic, it will still work just fine. It shouldn't smudge or bleed at all. But yeah, they're very compatible products together. And this one is disposable, so whenever it dries out, you do throw it away. There is another multiliner that's called the SP, and it is refillable just like the markers. So just to introduce there. But I'm just gonna start outlining over here. And with this 0.5 marker, I'm just gonna go over these larger shapes. So the roof curve, these outlines of the buildings right there, maybe the door frame, but yeah, things like that. And I'll just start from the bottom left and work my way over. In case of any smudging, but just like any type of water-based ink, whether it's a water-based pen or a marker, you do kind of have to give it time to dry, otherwise it will smudge. So rule of thumb, just give it a little time before your hand swipes over the area. And similarly to how I draw with my pencil, I like to kind of go up and down when I draw. Let me turn this so my hand doesn't block it. But when I'm outlining, I will often go up and down, not just in one line. I feel like it reestablishes the line whenever I'm kind of going back and forth, just to make sure it's more a thicker line and the pigment lays down flat. So that's just a couple of marks I made right there. And with this drawing being 4 by 4 inches, it's much easier to work and get started with small spaces. Whenever you're drawing larger things or coloring larger things, it just takes more layers and a little bit more time. So if you're new to Copic, I would definitely recommend working smaller and then working up in size as you feel more comfortable. So I'm going to work very slowly here on this oval shape. And there's a little bit of overlap right there. It wasn't quite perfect, so I'm going to go over it again. and try and smoothen that out. And then I'll do the other one right here. Circles can be tricky just because there is no end, there's no edges. But there we go. Speaking of edges, what's nice to keep in mind too, say you have a large drawing and you can tell like your hand starts to feel uncomfortable, I'm gonna need to pick it up soon. Try your best to have like pick up your pen at points of intersection. For example, this meets this building right here. So that's what I call an intersection. Same with these lines meeting at the tops or bottoms to connect with those uh, porch kind of areas right there. So that's just something to keep in mind as well when you are coloring. So I'm going to go ahead and keep drawing. See, I picked up my pen right there. It's not going to be as noticeable because it's a point where lines intersect. So I can pick that back up. Draw the little door frame here. Moving up and down again, sometimes up, down, and up, just to keep that line being firmly placed and a little bit thicker. And then I'll go over here. Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna outline this just really quick and then I'll show you some detailing tidbits and then we'll be done. So bringing back the big one here again. So notice how I have these lines, these hatching lines, or these dots. Those are there just for, again, details. So I'm going to add a few of those here. And I added them in places where I wanted to add more contrast. So this area I wanted to be a little bit darker than the middle of the building. Same with here at the bottom because there's a shadow behind this one. So that's why I'm drawing those lines there. And sometimes they're just there to be whimsical as well. So for example, maybe I'll draw little lines going down. Not too far, but just some little hash marks. That gives it some extra detail. Same with maybe some dots. So I'm adding just a few here in the window. Maybe add like a little reflective lines. So I will pick that up again. What you can do too to add some more details is maybe you want to have like a funky looking gutter. So you can also draw, I like to do this, little kind of waves almost. So you can add that. I'm going to add that right here. So when you apply the pen on top of the marker, it's just for adding some extra details. I don't know, it's like more quirky, like more original, definitely more illustrative. So those were just little wave marks right there. Okay, and yeah, I'll just keep on going here. And I'll glance over at the chat if I see any other questions. Maybe I'll add some little kind of cup shapes or U shapes is what I'm adding right now, these little guys.
So Alfio wants to know, instead of blending the colors, can they just use the markers of other colors? Or are there like other ways they can go about this? I know this is a blending class, but what's another like optional thing they can do with the markers they've got?
Yeah, so you can, and if you don't want to layer, to make a green with the yellow and blue, you can have a green or like buy G03 or whatever it is. You don't have to, like I did. I just want to show you if you're on a budget, because that was me in college. I needed to stretch my collection as much as I could. So I purposely tried to buy primary colors because I knew I could make the secondary colors out of them. It's just a way for me to save an extra buck or two. But yeah, you definitely don't need to do that if you don't want to. And I see a Copic versus Micron. Yeah, the Micron pens I think fade quicker. So I have used Microns. I definitely use them a lot in college. But like this color black, I feel like is just more of a pure black, and it's not going to fade as quickly. I'm gonna let this dry and then try and run my eraser over it. Because the problem I had with Micron, and this could just be me, but when I took my eraser, once I finished outlining my pencil marks, it would either smudge or like look kind of purplish, like a purplish black. So I'm running my eraser over this, and there is no fade, there is no color change. It still looks very black. And I would run into that issue sometimes with the Microns. Not saying it's a bad product, I'm just saying I would run into some more issues with them. And the Faber-Castell, they have Pitt pens, and those are okay as well. Our college bookstore carried those too. Sometimes when I would use those, the actual tip would start to tilt or like get a slant to it if I used it in one way too long. So, for example, if I'm coloring here and then I'll rotate it in my hand so I'm not putting the same pressure on the same point. If I did that too much, sometimes they would almost wilt or start to change shapes. So, Sharpie, how does that interact with Copic? Yeah, so with a Sharpie, this is a Sharpie, I take a line here, and just for comparison, and this is my multiliner. So this is your Sharpie, and that's your multiliner. I don't know if you guys can see this, but the one on the right looks a lot more black than the one on the left. And the one on the left is your Sharpie. So it has a little bit more purple tones. It's not as pure black. And it will bleed your Copic marker. So RIP to my YR23 here. But you can have a little bit of a bleed right there. It's not terrible right now, but there's no stain on my marker yet either, which is very happy. That was nice, but it will usually bleed, and that's not as nice. So can you please color in a flower? Oh, I don't think I did the basic flower shapes, but same geometry. We've got a circle, and then if you want, dividing it in half both ways. I'm going to bring this up and draw on my hand. But take that halfway point, right? And just connect petals this way. So bring this over here. So that's kind of a basic flower. You can have your central circle there and have your intersecting lines. And if you want, you can also draw lines over here. And then just draw the petal shapes, and that's your basic flower. I'm sorry I didn't get to that earlier. But yeah, so this is kind of what we were working on right here. I'm trying to see if there's any other things showing up. Oh, a bench. Okay. Yeah. Let me turn this. So a little bench. We're going to start off with just a rectangle. And I'm going to connect these lines. Let's see. And then we need to have this going down a little bit more. And the bench. So this is basically going right across the middle. And drawing a line here where you sit. And maybe some lines right there. This could be a very simple bench. Again, I probably should have outlined this area here in the middle, but just think back to basic geometry and rectangles, squares, circles, half circles, they can get you really far. And graph paper, if you're nervous about drawing straight lines, getting a gridded or graph paper can really help you. And just learning to stay perpendicular when you're drawing. Yeah, okay. I hope that was helpful. And here's the piece just one more time. If anybody needs a screenshot, I'm not sure. But thank you guys so much for joining, and thank you for all the questions. I also have this. So if you did participate in the craft today, hashtag make it with Michaels on Instagram. We also have Copic with us. My name is Shannon Brouk, and so I'm the name at the bottom here if you want to check out my own art. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, Nate, do you have anything else to add, or?
You got the Instagram link right there. Thank you everybody for joining us, and we'll keep an eye out on Michael's for when our next Copic class is going to be, and you can find our previous classes there.
Yeah, oh, I do think that the next month for May, we're going to have Michelle Houghton. She is a card crafter, and she'll be doing some sort of card. She hasn't told me, but we'll be having that next month. So,
yep.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yep.
Thank you guys so much.
Great class.
Thank you guys. Bye.